I'm Steve Cotton, President and CEO of Aqua Metals. We're a NASDAQ-listed public company. Call letters are AQMS on NASDAQ. And I'm going to tell you about what we're doing for the battery industry and leading really a revolution in the battery industry, starting with lead and then moving on to lithium-ion and other metals. Next slide. This is just our safe harbor. You can refer to that in the future. I'm not going to read that to you. Next slide. So what we're really doing first is changing an industry. The number one most pollutive thing that mankind does on Earth is to smelt. And this is an example in a picture you see to the left of the old way and the incumbent way of recycling metals from batteries. And smelting is used in many other industries. It's a very dirty, very dangerous, and highly emissive process that operates at furnaces that are 3,000 degrees or even more, and causes a lot of challenges. Even though the good news is you're recycling, the bad news is you're exposing workers, the community, landfills, and the air and emissions with problems. So you convert that to what we offer as the next slide. This is called Aqua Refining. What we do is we build lead one atom at a time through a continuous process with rotating discs that go into a room temperature organic biodegradable acid. And we digest from the recycling process into that acid the lead content in this instance, and then we plate out at a very specialized level through our Aqua Refining process, one atom at a time, ultra pure metal. So it's very novel compared to what you see from the Bronze Age. Next slide. This technology isn't lab or bench scale. It's been commercially demonstrated. We built in the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center a 140,000 square foot facility and demonstrated our technology and made 35,000 ingots. And we shipped those to the world's largest battery manufacturer, Clarios, who is also an investor in Aqua Metals. Clarios used to be Johnson Controls Power Systems division. You'll see those ingots pictured on the left, and because of the ultra pure metal that we make, they're the finest looking ingots in the $65 billion lead battery acid manufacturing industry. Next slide. So Aqua Refining creates that higher quality product, and because of that, there's little to no refining needed. You can see the lead spilling literally behind me, as well as on the slide, off of the plates and then down onto a conveyor belt to get compressed into briquettes. And it ultimately means that you can create much higher performance, much longer lasting batteries, recycle with a very minimal need to refine and at an equal or lower cost, and allows the existing recyclers that are under increasing environmental pressures to meet that demand as we go forward into the future. Next slide. We've really paid attention to our IP since the inception of the company in late 2014, and we have a global portfolio of IP that's really focused on materials and methods, inclusive of that continuous rotating disc process with that biodegradable room temperature electrolyte. You'll see the map legend down in the lower left that shows where we have approved patents and patents that are approved and as well as pending in the lighter blue that covers the globe pretty much everywhere that you'll see smelting. And there are about 300 lead smelters for our first application of Aqua Refining that are out there in the world that are targets for us to upgrade. And you can take this technology and bolt it on to existing facilities as well as deploy it to greenfield facilities. So that IP portfolio is very important. Our business strategy is really, now that we've demonstrated the technology, is to be an IP licensor as well as an equipment supplier of the equipment like you see behind me and you saw in the prior slides. Next slide. So why does Aqua Refined lead matter? Some people think lead's dead. It's actually not the case at all. The energy storage industry is growing at leaps and bounds. Lead is the mature industry. Lithium-ion, which we'll talk about in a minute, is a growing industry that's going to be adding to the capacity of the world in terms of gigawatt hours of storage. Things that are driving lead acid battery growth is we're putting a lot more cars on the road, particularly in developing countries. And if they're electric vehicles, they have lead acid batteries in them for the most part that don't last as long. In fact, yesterday I replaced the fourth lead acid battery in my 2015 Tesla Model S. They also have two batteries in them many times for the start-stop, in addition to the SLI, start, light, ignite, to start the engine to begin with. Solar, wind farms need battery energy storage, else you're taking energy that's created from clean processes and electrocuting worms because there's no place to put it if nobody has that peak demand at that moment in time. The industry that I came from, which was lead acid battery monitoring, which is in the data center world, which is, for example, enabling this type of a experience in a conference, has massive server farms backed up by massive battery farms. So when the utility fails, they have a bridge to get to the generator power, which are also started by batteries. And so there's a driving need for demand for stationary applications such as that as well. The lead industry is growing at about 3 to 4% cumulative annual growth rate. The lithium industry, in comparison and contrast, is growing at about 38%. And they're about going to be about equal size in terms of the recycling industry by about the end of the decade. So let's move on to the next slide.
Another 30 seconds.
So Aqua Metals' position for impact is really that we're the first of our environmentally friendly kind of technology. We've got $200 million invested, and we're going after a $20 billion market just with lead and double that with the lithium. And licensing discussions and equipment supply discussions are well underway. Next slide. We're driving a new clean industry with the lithium-ion, and we're building on that proven IP. We filed provisional patents. We've established an eco-network of multi-company partners to tackle the clean lithium-ion battery recycling world. And that is going to be beginning in early 22 at the Tahoe Reno Aqua Refinery, which is now owned by a company called LiNiCo, stands for lithium, nickel, cobalt, which we intend to have utilize our technology to recycle lithium-ion batteries in addition to lead. Next slide. This is our revenue path. We were founded in 2014. We developed the technology. We went into revenue in 2018 and 2019 and sold millions of dollars worth of lead from our technology. In 20 and 21, we're focused on the transition to the capital light equipment supply and licensing of our technology, and then getting revenue as we go into the future off of the equipment supply and licensing technology for lead as well as lithium. Next. I won't go through this in detail. Experienced management team and engaged board is focused on execution. We all come from the metals, mining, lead acid battery, licensing, energy industry. Our chairman of the board is a non-executive chairman for good corporate governance. Shark Yusufzai was president of global marketing at Chevron in one of his many roles at Chevron. Next. So what we're seeking is we're always interested in public-private partnership. We believe energy storage is the critical path to a sustainable future. You can't have a sustainable future unless you recycle it, the materials. The lead industry recycles, but it makes a mess of it. We're cleaning that up. The lithium industry, it doesn't recycle currently, and we're aiming to create a recycling ecosystem of a clean methodology. So those lithium-ion batteries are things that we can feel good about using. And also create a sustainable world for the future for our children and grandchildren. If you look at what we're interested in specifically, those are things like grants for research and development, government-backed loans, not only for ourselves. We did get a USDA-backed loan for Aqua Metals to build our plant that we ultimately did a $10 million loan coupled with our IPO to fund the building of the plant that we then paid back. But we're looking for government-backed loans for other activities, which could be inclusive of supporting our potential clients that want to take the risk, that have large operations, that we want to keep strategic metals and things like that in the US, and we would like to support our potential clients and connect them. We're looking for additional eco-network members, producers, and users of spent lead acid or lithium batteries will be pointed to in terms of where is the recycling happening and is it clean? And so we are trying to get others to join our eco-network of companies that are developing and deploying these technologies. We're looking for access to the feedstock as a part of that to recycle, and offtake buyers of cleanly processed high purity metals really from our licensees and operators of our equipment. So with that, I think I conclude.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions from our panelists?
How much, if any, additional kind of technical development work or just adjustments compared to recycling lead is needed for moving to lithium ion?
So lead is a single metal battery recycling environment. The nice thing that makes lead acid batteries so fungible is they're about 80% plus of the lead in a new battery is recycled versus from the mine, and the other 20% or less comes from mines. In a lithium world, you've got lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, et cetera. We will be taking the cells like the one you see behind me and adapting the chemistry a little bit and the technology towards very similar looking cells that will focus on each type of individual metal. And we'll be deploying those in the LiNiCo, lithium nickel cobalt recycling facility right here in Tahoe, Reno. And so it will look like what you see behind me, but the metal that comes off will look a little bit different for each type of metal, if that makes sense. I'll add to that's why lithium batteries are so difficult to recycle, and nobody to this day has commercially proven that you can actually recycle lithium-ion batteries to anywhere near the percentage levels. Lead batteries are recycled 99% by weight. So being able to go after the multiple metals and solve that type of environment is more complex and does require a core fundamental shift change in the technology. Some are going after the lithium industry for recycling with a process that I started with called smelting. And let's not build a world of smelting that's even worse than the lead smelting world.
Question here. So do you have an advantage in certification or regulatory process in recycling material?
Oh, absolutely. So if you look at the regulatory environment here in the US as an example, as well as Europe and China, really, the regulators as well as the Court of Public Opinion are shutting down smelters left and right. And they're being shut down because of environmental emissions. As I said, it's the #1 most pollutive thing that mankind does on Earth. A long time ago, many of these smelters were built far away from everybody, and then the urban and suburban infill happened around these places. Plus, we've realized that these emissions are problematic. Our process has orders of magnitude less emissions, as you can imagine, because it's liquid-based, it's biodegradable, organic acids and things like that. So the regulators love what it is that we're doing. So we're also, of course, talking to the various regulators like EPA in the US and other regulators throughout the world to make sure that we are considered for best available technology status. So when these facilities need to expand or new facilities need to be built, that's what happens. Another instance is when we're in India and Southeast Asia, where you see a lot of growth in automobiles and battery energy storage requirements. China has cracked down, and so they have pushed the manufacturing of batteries as well as the recycling of batteries out to Southeast Asia and India associated with that demand. And the governments, when they go for the greenfield builds, do not want to build smelter facilities that make an even bigger mess of the environment than they already have in their hands. And so we're seeing quite a bit of public-private partnership in those countries. And what we're seeking more of is right here in the US, public-private partnership, because of the regulation factors, but also in order to keep strategic metals in the US, as we all probably know, you can't get many of these metals like cobalt, for example, comes from the Congo. And it's very difficult to secure a green energy future in the US if you don't have secure minerals to put into that and to recycle into that. And so the technologies that are developed here in this country are, to me, just as, if not more strategic than the inception of the oil and gas industry and the seeking of energy independence for our country. This is just as important if we're going to have energy independence on an ongoing basis, and if we're going to have green energy storage that's a truly recyclable energy storage for our future.
Right. Actually, I echo that because a lot of these growing emerging market in Asia, they're a lot more conscious about environment. So you have a very, very good selling point right there. Yeah. Maybe we can just connect offline later. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Happy to.
Hi, Steve. I mean, this lithium-ion battery recycling is really hot, right? There are so many startups raising a big round to develop the technologies. Can you comment on where you are in the development stage, how you compare with other lithium-ion battery recycling startups?
Sure. So there's some that you're probably referring to that have gone out via SPAC, special purpose acquisition company, become public companies that way. And they have various technologies. Some of them are using smelting as their core technology. So they're talking about lithium-ion battery recycling, which gets people excited. But if you do the due diligence of what the impact of the planet and the workers is, it's not very good. And so the ones that are doing the smelting, because smelting has been around since the Bronze Age, they have operations and are operating to a very small extent to date. There are others that are doing hydrometallurgical. But if you ask those entities that are worth $1 billion plus on the stock boards, what IP do you have? The answer is usually none. It's trade secrets. You compare that to Aqua Metals, we have IP, and we filed further IP as it relates to the specific metals within lithium-ion recycling. If you ask them what their cash position is, it's usually not a very good answer. If you ask them what their access to ongoing capital is, it's new and fresh for them. If you ask them what their track record is in terms of what have they done to prove that they can do lithium-ion recycling, I feel that the answer is not as strong as what we have with Aqua Metals, because we've already built and demonstrated for the world's largest battery manufacturer the core technology and sold battery ingots that they made batteries out of that went into Ford, Toyotas, and GMs and the like. And then we also, because we built that Aqua Refinery that is now at the Lithium-ion facility that's in Tahoe, Reno, there is today a 140,000 square foot facility sitting on a piece of land that's getting outfitted and will become operational later this year and into the early part of next year. So on a timeline perspective, it's way ahead. And then the last point I would make is there's these other companies tend to want to go it alone a little bit. And we have a view of an eco network. And so our eco network is Aqua Metals, Lithium-ion, the operator, which we made an investment in. Comstock Mining, which is also another public listed company, made an investment because they're transitioning to more of an environmentals and metals recovery and valorization of metals type of a company. They're in there, and there's others that are in that eco network that is supporting, and we believe that it's going to take the brains and brawn of multiple companies to truly stand up the lithium-ion battery recycling industry. And that's the approach that we're taking and have taken from the get-go. We feel like we're pretty far along comparatively.